Did you know that despite all the negative headlines, Colombia is experiencing a tourist boom like never before? If you only got your news from social media and sensationalist headlines, you would think that tourism in Colombia is dead, but that is so far from the truth. The tourism stats tell a completely different story, and that's the topic of today's video: the state of tourism in Colombia right now and the outlook for the future. So first, to understand the future of tourism in Colombia, we need to understand the history. As evident in this graph right here, you can see that Colombia experienced an incredible increase in tourism in just a few years. You can see here, it's basically pretty flat line in the 90s, and then it starts increasing with a big spike in 2005, 2006. But why the sudden increase? Well, the increase in tourism, I believe, is directly correlated with two things. The first being the reduction in crime. In the year 2000, Colombia was considered one of the most dangerous countries in the world, if not the most dangerous. Several factors contributed to this reputation: homicide rates, kidnappings, armed assaults and violent crime, terrorist attacks, and very powerful drug cartels. All of these factors contributed in Colombia basically being run like the Wild West until they had a president called Uribe come into office. Uribe took office in the year 2022, and he was there until 2010. And he's actually credited for making great changes in the country. One of the factors that I just mentioned that made Colombia very dangerous was kidnappings. And one of the parties responsible for a large number of these kidnappings was the FARC. The FARC was actually a guerrilla group which was heavily involved in kidnappings as a means to fund their activities and exert political pressure. The fear of abduction was widespread, affecting both locals and foreigners. The conflict with guerrilla groups led to frequent terrorist attacks, including bombings, targeting infrastructure, military personnel, and even in civilian areas. When Uribe came into office, he ran an anti-FARC campaign with a clear action plan on how to eliminate these guerrilla groups. He actually had a big part to do with cleaning up Comuna 13, which used to be the most dangerous neighborhood in the whole world. It's actually located in Medellin. And now it's actually one of the hottest tourist destinations in the whole country. It's experienced significant change in just 20 years. And a big reason for that is that because in that area, there used to be a lot of guerrilla groups fighting against each other. And Uribe actually led an operation called Operation Orion. And he went in there with the military and actually got rid of the guerrilla groups and actually cleaned up the whole neighborhood. So during the 8 years that he was in office, he succeeded in many ways, and Colombia actually became a much safer nation. You can see here in the homicide rate in Colombia that Uribe, he came into office right here in 2022, and you can see it immediately declining, and it basically keeps on declining until 2010 when he left. From there it increases a bit and then it basically stays flat. I have to say at this point that Uribe did have his haters because some of his methods were a bit questionable. I'm not going to discuss that in this video, but just know that everything he did wasn't by the books. But what did all this mean in the broader sense? A newfound sense of safety was felt by the local residents of Colombia, as well as foreigners who were thinking of visiting this country. That's probably the biggest reason why tourism started to grow. But there's also another reason that needs to be looked at. And that second reason is the promotion of the country by the Colombian government. I'm guessing for many years, because it was so unsafe, they didn't really even want to promote their country because they didn't want tourists coming here, getting kidnapped, and then Colombia being in the newspapers for all the wrong reasons. So they didn't really promote for a long time until the late 90s and early 2000s. And the most famous of their promotion campaigns is this one, which came out in the year 2000.
There's a place where people never believed impossible was a word. A place where the rivers wanted to be an ocean, and the ocean grew weary of its solitude and joined the waterfall, the mountain, the snow peaks, and even another ocean. A place where the past lives harmoniously with the future, and the word infinity is written on the colors of the beach, the mountains, the jungle, and the sky.
Colombia.
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 Colombia. The only risk is wanting to stay.
So the tagline of this advertising campaign actually played on the fact that Colombia wasn't safe for so many years. The tagline was, Colombia, the only risk is wanting to stay. The purpose of this was to actually showcase the many positive aspects of the country, to change the global perception of Colombia from being known as just a lawless country full of criminals and drugs. And that's how Colombia changed from one of the most dangerous countries in the world to now one of the fastest growing tourism destinations in Latin America. Before we start exploring those actual tourism numbers, if you're interested in visiting Medellin, check the link that I left in the description. It's a free guide and it will tell you everything you need to know for a perfect week in Medellin. So what's the current state of tourism in Colombia? Well, in 2023, Colombia welcomed a record 5.8 million tourists, which was a 25% increase from 2022 and a 173% increase from 2021. Obviously, that was because of the pandemic. And in just the first 5 months of 2024, the country welcomed 2.5 million visitors, which marked a 8.4% increase over the same period in 2023. But what about the economic impact of tourism in Colombia? In 2023, Colombia's tourism industry generated $9 billion for the country. But what does that mean to the individual residents, the Colombians? Well, tourism in Colombia generates about 1.3 million jobs annually, and approximately 5.6% of the total workforce is actually employed in tourism. So that's the current state of tourism in Colombia. The country is making a lot of money, $9 billion a year to be exact, and 1.3 million jobs are a direct result of tourism as well. Now that we know about the past and the present, let's look to the future. What does tourism in Colombia look like over the next 5 to 10 years? Well, all things are pointing in the right direction. Just this past year in the World Travel Awards, Cartagena was named South America's leading honeymoon destination. Bogotá was named South America's leading business travel destination. Medellin was recognized as South America's leading urban escape destination, and Cali was celebrated as South America's leading cultural destination. So a lot of awards there and a lot of global eyes on Colombia right now for positive reasons, which is a nice change. In addition to these awards, in just the last couple of years, Provenza has been named one of the coolest streets in the world. Laureles in Medellin has been named the coolest neighborhood in the whole world, and Colombia has been named as one of the best places in the world to retire. And as I've lived in Medellin over the last 3 years, I've actually seen a lot of things changing. The first thing is the way that the country is actually dealing with a lot of the negative tourism that's coming here. Fico, the mayor of Medellin, has time and time again taken a stance against negative tourism. He's defined that as those that come solely for sexual tourism and drugs. You've also seen in recent times the city of Cartagena really crack down against the sexual tourism industry that's rife over there as well. And why do you see the governments in these cities cracking down on things like this? I don't think they do it just for moral reasons or to feel good about themselves. I think it's all motivated by the dollar. I think they know that Colombia has a lot of potential, but it's still kind of a no-go zone for many travelers. I think what they're trying to do is clean up the image of the city a lot further and make it a truly international, family-friendly tourist destination that they're going to invite a lot more of these demographics who currently probably wouldn't come here. Couples, single female travelers, families, those type of people. You haven't really seen them over the last 10 years because of various reasons. But over the last 3 years, I see more and more and more of these people arriving in Medellin and in other cities as well. I think they also need to deal with a safety issue in Colombia because a lot of these tourists being drugged and all these things, even though the numbers overall aren't that high, they seem to make the newspapers all over the world. And if someone sees those articles, usually they don't really read the details of who's this happening to. They just see, oh, another tourist dead. So even though it doesn't affect everybody, I guess perception is everything. And I think Colombia is doing a really, really good job right now to improve their global perception. And if they keep going like that, there's no limit to the type of tourism destination that this country can become. And now if you want to see why foreigners love Colombia and Colombian culture so much, then check out this video.